Hello readers, I'm Amy. Welcome to my wrap-up. If you're new here, I am not wrapping up entire months anymore. I'm just wrapping up every couple of books so that I can remember more about them, tell you more about them, not feel rushed, not feel like I have this huge project that I have to film and edit. So, let's get started. One of these I read in August and finished off the month with. The rest of these were read in September. So first off, I'm going to talk about These Women. This is a book, I mentioned it in my haul. I had like an extra Audible credit and I think I'd seen one person bring it up on their channel and I'm like, oh, okay, that sounds interesting. I'll use my credit on that. So I'm doing that video for my haul and I'm like, I should remember what this book is if I bought it. Even if I didn't really spend money on it, like I spent a credit on it, but I should really know what it's about. I'll just pick it up and read it. So I picked it up and I read it and it was brilliant. It's a story about sex work, about women, about our views of women and who they are and our opinions of how they lead their lives. So These Women is a murder mystery about kind of this serial killer going after these different women who are sex workers, and the cops are kind of not really doing much about it. They're not really investigating it. They have this one female detective, or maybe she's not a detective. Something had happened with her work stuff. But she's like the one person looking into it, the one person who is concerned, and everyone's like, why are you looking into this? They're just sex workers. No one freaking cares. And I loved that discussion. This book is kind of looking into these lives of each of these women. It's one of those that's a multiple character perspective, and I believe it's also multiple timelines. That was a little confusing for me with the audiobook. But we're looking at all of these sex workers who are getting killed or who know fellow sex worker friends who are getting killed. And they can't really spend too much time thinking about it because no one's going to care. And they have to move on and try and live their lives and try and make their money, being worried about, hey, am I going to be the next one? And it's just this phenomenal discussion about believing women, about believing sex workers, saying like, yes, you're a sex worker, but that doesn't mean you're not a person. So if you're at all into sex work stories, if you're into that kind of politic, please pick up this book. It was wonderfully written. Just great discussion in here. Loved it. Then I finally got to pick up Such a Fun Age. I didn't even think I was going to get to that this year, but it was on audiobook. It's one of those like, oh, I'll put it on hold from my library for the audiobook. I'll see if it comes in. It came in. Really enjoyed it. Didn't leave as much of an impression on me as some other race books that I've read this year, but like, it was good. You should probably pick it up. It's one of those really important books this year. You have this woman in her mid-20s who is babysitting a white girl, and someone at the grocery store where she's at freaks out. And that's just the beginning of the book and that one little incident. But the whole rest of the book plays out from that incident, where you're looking at the family of that little girl and how they feel as the years go on and how they feel about their babysitter and how their views change on their babysitter. And it was really good. It's looking at race not only from what happened in that grocery store, but looking at race from like this well-meaning feminist who kind of has the wrong idea of things. The mom of this little girl, it was so interesting to read from her perspective because it's like she's kind of fetishizing her babysitter who's in her 20s, and it got, at one point I'm just like, this is really creepy. Is something sexual gonna happen here? Like, it's a weird perspective, but I'm also really glad that I got that perspective because initially you meet this mom and it's like, oh cool, you're a feminist. You think your babysitter's awesome. Cool. But then it just gets weird and I'm like, this is strange, but I'm glad that we're having this conversation. I think it's important. So recommend that book. The next two books were by Riley Sager. So I read La Corridor last year and I'm like, that one, I think I really enjoyed the journey of the book. The ending, like, it was a good ending, but it wasn't what I expected, and I think that's what kind of caught me on that one. I saw Emily Fox, she just ranked all of Riley Sager's books in a video, and talking about it, like, I'm just like, I'm in that kind of mood. I'm just gonna put all of Riley Sager's books on hold, because that sounds like what I want to read right now. And so far I read Final Girls and The Last Time I Lied. Home Before Dark, or Home After Dark, or whatever it is still on hold. It'll be on hold for like another probably month or so before it's available. But I read Final Girls and The Last Time I Lied, and I'm still confused about Riley Sager. Final Girls, I believe, was his first book that he wrote, and I really enjoyed the ending of it. However, I also found it really predictable and really tropey as we're going through it, so that one I didn't really like the journey as much. And then Last Time I Lied, it started off interesting. Final Girls is about, like, the last woman standing in all of these different murders, and then all of these women are supposed to come together and they start getting killed off. And then Last Time I Lied is about a disappearance of these girls at a summer camp. And at the start of that, I was really enjoying it. But as it goes on, I'm finding it really predictable in, like, oh, this person is sick? Well, they probably have cancer. Yep, they have cancer. And they're probably gonna do this one thing in order to deal with that. Yep, they did that one thing. Like, it was those little moments that were really predictable and really tropey. And as it went on, it also just felt too long. I think Last Time I Lied was like a 12-hour audiobook. I think that easily could have been cut to 8 hours. Because by the time we're starting to get to the end of it, there's so many layers to the end of it, and the more I listen, the more tired I get, and I'm like, can we just end this book already? So I like what Riley Sager is trying to do. I think he has some interesting stories to tell, but something about the way that he goes about it, it's predictable and it's tropey, and I think I enjoyed reading them for the most part, but he's definitely like a solid 3-star author, maybe a little less depending on the book. I'm like, I'll read his books, but I don't know how much I really care. I don't know. Maybe I'm putting this badly. Last book that I'm going to talk about was a buddy read with Victoria from What Victoria Read. We read Perfume. So she recently did her big birthday book haul where she opened up all the books that her friends sent to her, and one of them was Perfume, and I'm like, oh hey, I'm up for rereading that. If you want to read it together, we'll read it together. So she got a hold of me and she's like, hey, I'm ready to read Perfume if you're ready, and I'm like, okay. So I should probably get my book out. Perfume. So this book is a lot weirder than I remember it being. I mean, of course, it's a weird book, but you're following this man throughout his entire life who he himself does not have a smell. You know, like, if this is gonna sound really weird. If you smell your baby, if you smell your spouse, like you smell something, you smell that inherent scent of them, you can smell like their pheromones or something. He doesn't have that. He is completely scentless as a human being. However, he has this phenomenal nose. He's got a better nose than any animal you've ever heard of. He can smell from a mile off just all of these individual characteristics of a city or a town. And as the story goes on, because this is Perfume, the story of a murderer, so he ends up going to these different jobs where he's kind of refining his sense of smell and his understanding of smell, and eventually he's learning how to create those scents for himself. He ends up working for a perfumer to kind of learn those techniques of how to get smells out of things, and eventually starts killing people for their scent. And it's weird. I remember Victoria just being at one point like, what am I reading? But we both still really enjoyed it. I think she explained it really well, where she's like, it's definitely overwritten. Like, he spends too much time explaining this one part of this one character, this one part of the story. We spend too much time there. He uses too many words to say too little, but it's still really well written, and you're not really mad that you read all of those extra words. And I think she was right in her opinion that this could actually be a novella and be just as good. Like, it is a little long for what the story contains, and I think a lot of that has to do with the overwriting. But like, I'm not mad I read those extra pages. It was interesting, if weird. There's this part where he's like in a cave because he's trying to run away from the smells, and then he goes towards them again, and the ending is something else. There's not much I can say about this book without totally spoiling it. But it's good. It's a weird, good book. Like, whenever you say a book is weird, I'm kind of put off by it. Like, I don't know if I want to pick this up. But I would recommend picking this up. If not for the story, then for the writing. I'd actually be interested to read more of Patrick Suskind's books. I probably butchered that last name. I'd be interested in reading more of what he wrote. I think he's definitely an author I should look more into because I really, really enjoyed this. That is what I have for my wrap-up for right now. I've got a lot going on in October, so I can't wait to talk about my October books. If you would like to know more about what I'm reading in October, I will put my Vampathon video up above because I'm hosting a readathon. It's going to be a really easy readathon focusing on vampires because what else do I ever talk about? Please like, subscribe, be my friend on social media, and I will see all of you in my next video. Bye, friends.